The world we live in, it's a busy one. Always rushing, here, there, everywhere. Which annoyingly can leave us with almost no time left to ride our bikes. So I'm going to tell you how to get fit and stay fast from just 30 minutes worth of cycling. And to make sure you're getting the very best from yourself, I'm also going to speak to Neal Henderson, Head of Science at Wahoo Training. Now, depending on where you live in the world, there's going to be different recommendations on how much exercise is advised in order to stay fit and healthy. One of the more common recommendations is to do 30 minutes worth of exercise per day. Now, a moderate exercise according to the NHS in the UK could be anything from a brisk walk, cycling gently, swimming, water aerobics, volleyball, doubles tennis, but it can also include some things like pushing a lawnmower, hoovering, painting and decorating, or heavy gardening, whatever that is. Now, a 4-year study conducted by the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that by doing just 30 minutes of exercise every single day, you could reduce the chance of early death by up to 80%, which is fantastic news. But what about people like you and I, who not only want to stay fit and healthy, but want to actually make improvements to our fitness? Can 30 minutes be enough? Yes, it can. But what you do with those 30 minutes is going to be absolutely crucial. Now, having raced as a pro just a number of years ago, I quite literally had all the time in the world to train and ride my bike. But even so, I'd still try to be quite specific with the training that I did. These days though, well, I'm often found at GCN Megabase, filming videos, which leaves me with surprisingly little time to try to stay fit and train for a specific event. Which means, generally speaking, I only do 30 minutes worth of exercise about 5 days out of the 7 days of the week. And without kind of wanting to sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet, I think when you take that into account, it makes my level of fitness seem, pretty impressive. I can do 370 watts for 20 minutes. I've got a maximal power of 1,200 watts, which is, well, it's about the same as your average household blender. Now, finding 30 minutes of time throughout the day should be pretty manageable for everyone because, well, there's 24 hours and just 30 minutes out of that, well, it's just over 2%. And to make the most progress and improvements, your cycling is going to need to be pretty specific. It doesn't have to be tough and grueling all the time, but it does have to serve the purpose working towards what you're trying to achieve. Now, the event that I have spent the last 2 months training for, and I've still got a few weeks left to go, is the 4-kilometre individual pursuit in the velodrome. But even if the event or target you're working towards is much longer in duration, I still think doing 30 minutes worth of exercise is enough to make improvements. Right, it's enough chat from me, so to find out more, I'm going to need to speak to Neal, our expert, and see what advice he has for both you and me. So, see what Neal's got to say. Hi Neal, thanks for taking the time to speak to us. Going to be super helpful to pick your brains and hear what you've got to say about training when you've got minimal time. So is 30 minutes of exercise enough in terms of fitness, health? What sort of improvements can we see?
Yeah, from a big picture point of view, any activity that you're able to do consistently can help you be just generally healthier. That can be some combination of like cardiovascular fitness, if it's endurance exercise that you're doing, just being active, even if it's like going out for a walk, has still some mental health benefits, and even potentially, a little bit of skeletal bone loading, even with a walk or a little bit of a jog. Those kind of things, regardless of even like performance benefits, are good for people. We are as a species designed to move. If we move consistently, we are better able to handle anything that life throws at us, mentally, physically. So even 30 minutes, a lot of times people are like, poo-poo the idea of only 30 minutes as endurance athletes. If you're trying to do longer things, or if you're comparing to whatever, a World Tour pro or somebody's doing the Tour de France, 30 minutes is not going to win the Tour de France, I guarantee you that. I guess I can't guarantee that, but I'd nearly stake my entire career and say that you could not train just 30 minutes a day and win the Tour de France.
I think it's a pretty fair claim to make, isn't it? So in terms of, you're saying it can be beneficial in lots of different ways, not just necessarily performance-based, but health-related. So like you say, cardiovascular system. So do you think, is there a way that we can dial in our 30 minutes? Because I guess if it isn't much time, we're going to need to make the most out of what we're doing.
Definitely. In that regard, then, when we have those shorter blocks of time, if we do have a goal of changing our performance, of being able to be more capable, being able to have greater performance, then we really do need to have some purpose and progression to what we do with that training time. And so that really comes into then having a bit of a plan and making sure that you're addressing what you're trying to, change. So
yeah, that's really important what you say about if you've got a certain goal in mind, because the way I've often approached cycling before is on a very rudimentary basis of, if you've got something you want to achieve, just practice it more and more and breaking it down into simple chunks, which, like you say, you're not going to be able to go and win the Tour de France on 30 minutes worth of exercise because, well, it isn't practicing what you've got to do. But something that I do always feel mindful of when I'm trying to condense everything down into 30 minutes is that if I'm going to do a bit of a warm-up and then presumably a short cool-down towards the end, that's a fair little chunk of, certainly in terms of percentage, of what you're going to do done. So do you think there's a way of trying to sometimes combine the warm-up with some shorter efforts and then try and make it all really count?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a couple things. I mean, you think of like a warm-up and a cool-down as transition from a state of rest to being active. That transition up is that warm-up, and then the cool-down is that transition from being very activated down to a resting state. A lot of cases, I would say shortening the recovery time, the cool-down time is probably best for most folks. In some cases, you do need to add a little more on that warm-up, but have it be particular to what you're doing. So as a pursuit, somebody preparing for a pursuit, you have a standing start, which is an element that is specific to that task that you need to have some practice and some repetition of, not just like the neuromuscular demand of it, but really what happens in terms of that force production, that kind of high lactate spike that you get from that type of effort. So including a couple standing starts, one or two, as part of your warm-up for whatever other sustained type of effort and intensity you do, would be a really perfect thing to have kind of consistently in there.
Okay, so that's something that I guess everyone could try and incorporate into their own exercise, is to take an element of it and reduce it down and incorporate it into that sort of build-up phase that you were talking through. So certainly for the pursuit effort I'm looking at, it's an all-out maximal effort. But do you think there is still an advantage to be had when you're reducing the time down to lower intensity efforts? Or do you think all of the training that we need to be maximum capacity, super tough all the time, because we've only got 30 minutes? It's got to be grueling.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily one or the other. There's going to be some continuum in that. So that kind of purpose and progression is part of things. With that in mind, like probably having 2 days a week with that really high intensity focus, maybe a third day, is probably the limit for most folks. Trying to tack on and do 5 days with that really intense, even for those short sessions, would simply overload you. You're not going to have adequate time to recover and adapt to that training stress. You can get more tired that way for sure, but you might not get better. And that's the thing. So it is a balancing act. And again, it may not seem like it's a lot, but if you do it right, if you do two, maybe three of those high intensity sessions with specificity and progression, you're going to get a majority of the possible benefits that you would get from even doing longer sessions of those kind of same intensity.
So having mentioned that you say 2, maybe 3 really high intensity sessions throughout the week, do you think the other 30-minute options that you've got throughout the 7 days of the week, I'm trying to weigh up here in terms of what's best, because if you've got 30 minutes that you can allocate to your exercise, on days when you're trying to rest and recover, I'm often in a dilemma. Do I ride really easy for 30 minutes and think, right, that's helping me recover with increasing like the blood flow to the muscles, or do I just take the day off, put my feet up and rest? Or maybe do some off the bike stuff? I found it's a real predicament I'm often in, wondering what's best.
Yeah, you probably do need to have at least a day of like active recovery of that just 20, 30-minute easy spin, very low power, just kind of keeping a consistent, 90, 100 RPM, something like that. Ride the rollers is a good thing, especially if you're riding on the track.
Yeah.
If your warm up might be on, just the rollers like that, just getting used to that is definitely a good thing. But active recovery does provide a benefit for the next day's session. And there's a couple different things. You'll see cortisol levels decrease from the beginning to the end of even a 20 or 30-minute easy recovery spin. You're going to see an increase in, if you have adequate fueling, you're going to see an increase in muscle glycogen. So that stored form of carbohydrate getting back into the muscle. And you're also going to have generally, again, a better mental outset. Again, if you were, with work and things like that, having that bit of time where you're decompressing mentally will allow you to oftentimes sleep better, which better quality sleep is going to lead to better recovery. All of those things do make you better, not because you've gone hard in that, but because you've actually done something, but you've done it nice and easy. So you should probably have 1, if not 2 days where you do that, ideally the day after your higher intensity days. So let's just say if you were at most doing 3 really hard days, like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Tuesday and Thursday, I would do that easy 30-minute recovery spin.
That's really interesting, actually, that you think if you're going to make it really specific, so hard efforts recover, hard efforts recover. That's quite good, because I think it's a good way of breaking the week down, especially in people's working week, generally Monday to Friday. Well, actually, that leads me on nicely to, because you've worked with a whole host of world-class athletes and a whole host of different people, but the majority of, I guess, leisure cyclists or amateur cyclists, they're going to have a full-time job, which leaves you with, generally speaking, the morning or the end of the day. Now, I have immediately found when I was racing, or even now when I'm trying to exercise, that I'm a morning person. If I don't do my exercise or my training in the morning, the probability of me doing it at the end of the day is almost zero. So do you think is that a trend that you generally see with other people? And do you think there is a benefit to doing it in the morning, or should it be on a almost case-by-case basis?
It is a little bit, there's definitely an individual thing. For those who work full-time, if you have family and job, a lot of times that morning time is when you can almost guarantee that you'll have minimal interruptions. Again, sometimes a kid gets sick, you have, things that come up, but by and large, if you get it done in the morning, then the rest of the day, even though it may go south on you, might blow up a little bit. If you've gotten it in then, much better off. If you wait for the evening hours, more often than not, just things push, whatever schedule, whether it's work, family, all those things. By the end of the day, sometimes if you have to manage all that, you might actually have that time available, but you have no mental energy ready to do it. Like you just get there and you're like, I can't even, right? You start, you try to warm up and you're like, 100% you do one effort and you pull the pin. Like it's so much harder later in the day for most folks.
Yeah.
That being said, a perfect world situation, most people's body is better ready for higher intensity, not in the morning, but a little bit later. But we don't always get that choice. You got.
Yeah, I guess it's like it's weighing in that trade-off between your body is probably going to perform best later on the day, but if you don't ever get around to doing the exercise, then it's a waste of time. Actually, that's a good point, actually, because I'm intrigued to know, do you think purely by riding inside, you can make a real headway and improvements to your physical performance? Or do you think it really has to be combined with riding outside or riding for longer periods of time?
Yeah, I would say you're going to make a lot of the gains, even if you're just riding indoors in those shorter sessions. That being said, ideally on the weekend, you would want to ride a couple hours one of those days if you can, at least an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours or so outdoors, or again, it could be indoors on the weekend where you get that longer, just low intensity endurance session. That would provide you almost all the possible benefits that you could get for that kind of a reasonable, amount of training time, just a few hours per week.
I'm super glad that you said that, because that's kind of how I approach it. I'm sort of like, in the week, I've got 30 minutes, I'll ride indoors, and then at the weekend, if I'm lucky, I'll head outside. So I'm pleased to think I can get most of the benefits. Okay, no, that's super interesting, actually. I'm really pleased to be able to share some information and some insight into that. It's going to actually really help me moving forwards with the event that I'm working towards, but also I think it's going to be really beneficial for everyone that's trying to cram their training in around busy day-to-day life. And well, yeah, thanks for taking the time to speak to us. And basically, I've got no excuses anymore now. It's all down to me.
You can do it, man. Just keep a focus, purpose, and enjoy.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
So there you have it. 30 minutes worth of exercise is enough to see improvements to your fitness and keep you fit and healthy. And if you want to see how I get on in the event which I'm doing, the 4-kilometer individual pursuit, then subscribe to GCN Tech, because I'll have a video coming out on that very, very soon. And I'll also have a video over on the GCN Tech channel taking a closer look at the bike, the equipment and the kit that I'm going to be using to help me ride as fast as possible. And I am really keen to hear your thoughts on this. So let me know in the comments section down below if you think 30 minutes worth of exercise is enough to keep you fit and make improvements to your fitness, or whether you think you need to get out and ride for a little bit longer. Right, I'm out of here. See you later. Vlogger life.